from a different state. So thank you, Ravindra, for being here. And most importantly, thank you very much, because this is Sunday morning and you are kind of, giving your precious time, free time or relaxation time for my talk. So this is more important for me. Now, let me directly go to my presentation. Uh, Sir, is it visible?
Not yet, ma'am.
Um, my window is shared.
It is
Yeah, it
visible
is
now.
now coming. Yeah, it is
Okay,
there.
thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I hope this is readable, right?
Yes, it is
Any
okay.
inputs, please? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, thank you very much. So, travel writing, as Yahya sir has talked about, this is emerging genre. Not only as far as I kindly request all of you to please mute your mics. Perhaps there is the mic is on and it's creating a background disturbance. Thank you. So, travel writing is basically an emerging genre, not only in South Asia, but I would rather say across the world. Travel writing is has still, been considered as more of a non-serious and commercial genre, since still we are required to take this genre as a serious literary genre, where you can actually think of doing a serious research. But somewhere in the 20th century, people have started taking more interest in this genre as an actual genre, and not as the sir Yahya sir has given example of few fiction. For example, Gulliver's Travel, or for instance, you must have read Pilgrims. I'm not able to recall name of 14th century famous travelogue or travel account, fictitious travel account. Um, Let me, I'll get back to it if I recall it somewhere in between. So, when I took up this genre as a part of my MPhil work, actually in the beginning, I literally liked it so much because not much has been done on this genre. And across South Asia, still a lot has to be done. And as far as world literature is concerned, across the world, still there are less research scholars, or there are less people who are taking this genre or pursuing this genre as a part of their serious research. So today, my actual intention of this presentation is just to establish a strong foundation for all of you to understand that this is not something which we say, for instance, on web or on Google, we may come across so many travel writers, so many travel blogs. But those travel writers or travel blogs, or those travelers who have been working commercially or writing commercially, they are still far off from the serious research which should be considered, or should be taken into consideration as far as our literature is concerned. As Yahya sir also said, that in our English departments across India, I would say, and of course across the world, we are still uh, trying or starting to accept this genre as a part of our syllabi, our curricula, because
Ma'am,
sorry, yes,
sorry to disturb. There is a problem, I think, somewhere in the presentation. Can you please reshare it again?
okay,
It is
sure,
blinking. It is blinking on the screen.
sure, sure, sure. How about now?
Not visible yet,
Is
ma'am.
it okay?
It takes a bit of time. Yes, ma'am. It is visible now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Right. So the basic intention of my today's presentation is just to create uh, a strong foundation for all of you to understand that travel writing, which is the topic of this presentation, travel writings, fictitiously factual and factually fictitious, is not all fiction, is not all commercial, is not all something which we take for granted, but it is actually something which has been there since the very beginning, uh, along with so many other genres which we pursue as a part of our serious literature. But it is only now, almost after 19th century, that we have actually started taking this genre with its various forms seriously. So let me directly go to my presentation. Here, there is another kind request that I will be presenting. I will try to uh, explain the very basic introduction of this genre. I will also take you through the ages, how we can trace historical roots of this genre, and also a bit of criticism here and there, since 1 hour is actually very less when we are talking about entire genre of travel writing, because this is an umbrella term. So I have tried my level best to make it as simple as possible, and just so that you can develop your interest perhaps in this genre as well. So I would encourage you to please note down all your questions or inquiries. And once my presentation is over, all of you are welcome with as many questions as possible. So thank you very much once again. And now let me begin my presentation. So I would like to begin with a very interesting quote by St. Augustine, where he says, the world is a book, and those who do not travel read only a page. So this is a very strong foundation, I would say, a very strong argument when we are talking about genre. Travel locates our worldly progression. Travel assists in discovering and understanding ourselves as well as others in broader perspective. In fact, traveling is one thing everyone does at various levels and in various forms. Travel makes one less prejudiced, unbiased, and tolerant about the notions, people, and objects. Travel broadens one's mind and widens one's horizons. The traveler encounters novel experiences and ideas while traveling which have never been encountered before. At times, traveling helps one changing one's opinions on various issues and makes one more open-minded. Indeed, it makes one more independent as the traveler parts away from familiar people and places while residing among unknown people on an unknown space. While encountering a variety of distinct foreign customs and traditions, travel makes one aware of different culture, history, religion, uh, belief, tradition, and lifestyle of the residents living in distant places. One might also end up exploring more about one's own self, culture, and society, which lead towards appreciating one's own culture and customs, which oftentimes we neglect to do. We don't respect, or we are less conscious about our own culture, about our own tradition, about our own self. But this revelation comes as soon as you start traveling, and this has been my personal experience. So for me, this is very true. Moreover, as Flaubert observes, I quote, traveling makes one modest. You see what a tiny place you occupy in the world, and this is something absolutely which absolutely touched me, because when we live among a small area or region, or we spend our entire life living there, we never come to this realization that the world is much more beyond this, and there are so many things, there are so many issues, and There are so many other things which are to be explored and which are much more important than the small things, the trivial things we spend our most of time mulling over, or sometimes uh, contemplating over. And more importantly, when you start traveling, you realize that you are a lifelong learner. Now, this is very simple. When we say it, most of the time we don't mean it. But when you start traveling, you actually start meaning that, of course, I am just a beginner and there is so much out there to learn, to explore, to understand. And this makes one actually humble, kind, and more tolerant. Let me trace the etymology of this word. So, as stated in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, usage of the word travel was found first in the 14th century. The derivation of the word travail was found in the spoken Latin verb trepalier, that means to torture. The word trepalier came from a name of an instrument of torture called trepalium. Later, trepalier was developed into a medieval French word called travailer, which meant to torture or torment as well as to suffer or labor. The French verb "travailler" was borrowed into medieval English, describing the journey from place to place, which was challenging, arduous, and certainly exhausting. This is perhaps the reason how medieval speakers of English language have started using the word "Trevelyan" for a journey. The closest English word for travail is probably toil, though travail denotes a traveler is not just exerting great efforts but also living through an affliction through the process. Traveling involves a special moment. Interestingly enough, the word moment can be elaborated in two distinct manners. First, firstly, a physical moment, and secondly, a metaphorical one. Metaphor can be defined in Greek as transport as well as movement. Therefore, the movement or traveling ranges from one moving to and from place, region, nation to the other, leaving one's own place behind to encounter differences and otherness. Uh, I have brought in certain definitions, but before I start discussion of the definitions, let me tell you, travel writing, as I said, it is in its very emerging, developing form uh, until now, and this is multidisciplinary in its nature. So critics or researchers have still been kind of debating over the exact or one definition of travel writing, and that's the reason we may come across so many different types of definitions to define this very genre. Both recorded and unrecorded tales of traveling have been around us since ages. However, prominence of these narratives made it difficult for the critics to shape one definition. Travel and journey entails the crossing of cultural boundaries, trespassing, visiting, or even conquest, just to mention a few. Critics have been debating on the objective of study, theme, character, and plot of travel writing. As a broad term, travel literature has always had room for the variety of materials. Therefore, travel writing has sustained an intricate correlation with a number of closely connected genres. As Carl Thompson delineates the term travel writing as, I quote, consists of incomprehensive variety of forms, modes, and journeys, I unquote. Jonathan Rubin also notes, I again quote, travel writing is a notoriously roughish open house where different genres likely to end up in the same bed. It accommodates the private diary, the short story, the prose poem, the rough note, and polished table talk with indiscriminate hospitality, I unquote. So, Jonathan Rubin has kind of, validated or justified his argument when he is saying travel writing is a notoriously roughish open house, where you can bring in different types and kinds of genres, forms, together. Paul Fussell also attempts to define travel writing and argues that it is, I again quote, a first-person account, I unquote, of the writer's experiences. So first-person account is true most of the times when a person is traveling from one place to the others and recording one or documenting one's observations, personal observations in two manners. One could be a very subjective observation and the other could be objective observation. So we'll be discussing more about it later. The travel narratives can be termed as an encounters and negotiations of alterity that leads to a conflicts between similarity and difference, identity and alterity, and self and other, which implies such encounters by looking at traveling with different prisms while publicizing the acquired knowledge. Travel literature and genres, a quick glance. Travel literature has always been associated with the global literatures. It is multidisciplinary in nature, as I've already said. It might also merge with history, geography, and/or anthropology, so as to mention few. The genre also takes in several forms, such as nature writing, outdoor literature, travel memoirs, guidebooks, reports, including autobiography, and so on. Carl Thompson has put this interestingly by explaining travel writing is, again I quote, a such species of memoir in which the autobiographical narrative arises from the speaker's encounter with distinct or unfamiliar data, and in which the narrative, unlike that in a novel or a romance, claims literal validity by constant reference to actuality. So this is more interesting that unlike, for instance, novel or romance, which has more aspects of fiction, travel writing could actually, while reading a travel book or travel narrative, we might find more relatability or resonance with the real world, whereas the case with novel or romance, for instance, is that we might find more about, oftentimes more about real world utopia and which has less connection with reality. The employed genres often, while describing travel accounts, share certain common characteristics. Therefore, travel in a way provides a space for the comparative analysis across cultures, geographies, and history with modest assumptions. It also shares transcultural connections between knowledge and common anxieties of the traveler. Such apprehensions are a custom part of of the risk a traveler encounters. So this risk is certainly well acknowledged before the traveler set en route for seeing or for unveiling larger, unknown, unfamiliar world. Different forms of the text related with the travel literature were in fashion in the ancient era. The most basic amongst these documents were called periploi in Greek or navigations in Latin. These are ancient genres of text that were used in voyages for providing navigational directions to sea captains. The documents, however, known as itineraria in Latin, were used for overland traveling as well. It should also be taken into consideration that since the very beginning, again I quote, travel for the sake of experience created by the travel itself, historically known as pilgrimage, remain a popular and even increasing form of travel, I unquote. So travel, people set on traveling for so many different reasons. It varied to different regions, different nations, or for people, individuals across the world. But I would say pilgrimage, traveling as a pilgrim, has been something which has been found one common aspect in people across the world. Travel and experience. The understanding and formation of travel narratives is closely associated with the experience of travel to foreign and unfamiliar places. The correlation between travel and experience is mirrored in the etymological lineage of the Indo-European words for travel, from the closeness of the German Erfahrung I might pronounce it a bit differently since this is not an English word. So please do excuse my pronunciation if there is any error. It means experience, and irfaran, that means to travel, to the ways in which experience itself connotes a passage through a frame of action. So experience and action, they go hand in hand when it comes to traveling. Travel narratives are the manifest of the narrative of space and difference that leads to numerous novel ways to understand keen-sightedness and being, so one's own existence. Hence, this physical journey also implies the psychological journey of the travel that could both be subjective as well as objective. Travel can also be considered as simultaneous confrontation and or negotiation of the other and the self at the same time. Such dual dynamics that goes hand in hand in the travel narratives actually make it a fascinating and intriguing study. Therefore, the special moment, geographical quest, or the journey outward, for instance, soon becomes the discovering of self, that is, the journey inwards. So, the traveling, which is more about special moment or our physical journey, has a direct relevance or relatability with the journey inwards. So as we travel, as we start exploring the world, it so happens that we start looking within, because during traveling, you get more time when you are not occupied with so many other things, where you do not get time to focus on your own self. So I would say traveling is something which actually offers you a chance or opportunity to look within and being and getting more aware about your own self or your own existence. Thompson puts it well by saying, again I quote, "The reader of a good travel book is entitled not only to an exterior voyage, to descriptions of scenery and so forth, but also to an interior, a sentimental or a temperamental voyage which takes place side by side with outer one." So, thus, both the journey turns out equally crucial and intriguing. So, whether it is a fictitious traveler or whether it is a factual traveler, you might find mirroring of travel writer's own self, his or her own reflections in his or her writing, somewhere scattered here and there. Now, this is a very important aspect, the aim of travel literature. Why do people travel, or why people have been traveling since the very beginning? What could be the reason for that? So, the aim of travel literature is to denote a literary significance to travel writing. The documentation of the traveler is called travelogue, as it records the journey of a traveler. As noted in the Oxford Dictionary, the word travelogue was originated in the early 20th century from travel on the pattern on monologue. So travelogue most of time could be more or less a shorter or longer monologue. Travel literature includes journeys by land or sea and sky to various places across the nation or to the other nations. The journey could also be cross-cultural or transnational. Literary travel accounts fulfill identical purposes at a time. They open up a window to the outer world, in addition to give insight into travelers' own observations and beliefs about particular place, people, or culture, including the society he or she belongs to or intended to visit. Purposes of itinerant. So itinerant is a traveler, the one who prepares itinerary. There are several common purposes shared by the travelers around the world, why people may have traveled beyond their own culture and society. Some may have traveled with the purpose of satisfying their personal curiosity, inquisitiveness regarding the larger exotic world, which is absolutely unfamiliar, alien, yet more attractive. As Albert Camus has rightly said, I quote, "Travel, which is like greater and graver science, brings us back to ourselves, as this is the same thing that I've been repeating again and again until now. Certain, whereas universal purposes would have been trade and commerce, recreation, that is leisurely travel, diplomacy, sightseeing, administration, exile. So here when I use this word exile, so exile could be, we can recall this instance of exile of Ram, Lord Ram. So exile, military operations, wars, crusades. So crusades has direct connection with Christianity. So crusades are the kind of, we could say, more or less military operations where people who are knights, they would travel from one place to the other, fighting to save their own religion or spread religion. Migration, so migration is a contemporary burning issue, which has turned out really problematic and painful if we just try to bring in the contemporary scenario. But migration has been into existence right from the very beginning. Missionary efforts, so again here I would like to bring in the instances of missionaries. So Christian missionaries who have been traveling from one place to the other across the world, spreading knowledge of their religion, attracting more and more people to accept the religion, or putting in so many efforts to attract people uh, to their religion and spreading the word of the God. And the search for economic and educational opportunities. Now, this purpose is certainly very contemporary, relevant, because even today we travel, we migrate, we move from one place to the other. As far as economic, for instance, our employability is concerned, or educational opportunities are concerned, in I'm sorry, there seems some error. So let me just go back to it. Is it visible, sir?
It is visible, ma'am. It is visible.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm really sorry for this interruption, unintended interruption.
It's okay, ma'am.
So I was talking about educational opportunities in the foreign lands, which is actually even the case today, including pilgrimage, as I have already said a few things about pilgrimage and their existence in humankind, or human race, right from the very beginning. A quick glance over the history. So the roots of the travel writing lies thousands of years back in the past. Since then, people have been traveling and many have been sharing their experiences. It is debatable as to when the traveling actually started and who the first traveler was. Historians and anthropologists from across the world have been arguing on this question with diverse opinions. For instance, in the classical era, while the writing was invented, fragmentary written travel accounts of the foreign traveling came into view as records in Mesopotamia and Egypt. On the other hand, the roots of the Western travel writings can be traced back to the biblical books of Genesis and Exodus, which were written in the 5th century BCE. Constantine was the first Christian emperor of Rome, as observed by Eusebius. I quote, Constantine's mother, Empress Helena's pilgrimage in 327 CE, known as the first well-known and well-documented pilgrimage, I unquote. Youngs further put the first recorded account of the pilgrimage after Empress Helena was of Bordeaux's pilgrimage, which was recorded in the year 333 CE. The Christian pilgrimage account of Egeria entitled Peregrinatio et Terram Sanctam is observed by Carl Thompson as, again I quote, the earliest first-person non-fictional narrative of travel in the Western tradition, I unquote. According to the historian Lionel Cassin, I quote, the earliest detailed account of a voyage in existence, I unquote, is a disastrous voyage of an Egyptian priest named Venemon, as written in his report, around 1130 BCE, from Thebes to Lebanon to purchase for his temple a consignment of cedar wood. So, as I said, we could not manage to even come to a point where all the researcher or kind of critics could agree to one instance where we could say this was the first instance which has been recorded so far in the history as the first traveling, or this was the first person who could be known as the first ever traveler recorded in the history. It is a debatable issue. Travel writing, fiction and non-fiction. The records of celebrated fictional epics depicting romance believed to have laid the foundation for the genre. They are, for instance, Beowulf, a significant epic that is the longest and richest Old English epic poem, Homer's The Odyssey, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, to name a few. The Epic of Gilgamesh is often considered as the earliest existing eminent work of literature. However, Carl Thompson puts that the Odyssey, which is known as one of the earliest written fictional and non-fictional account of travel writing, initiated, I quote, the Western tradition of travel writing, I unquote. These romances give a picture of a wandering of their protagonists, where they encounter several adversities like shipwrecking or kidnapping by pirates and many more such difficulties en route to their destinations. The protagonist would travel through all hazards, struggles, and hardships. As a true Christian, in the end, divine and virtue wins against the evil, which would be moral in such romances. The end of the 13th century was marked by Geoffrey Chaucer's celebrated fictional pilgrimage account, Canterbury Tales. So this is the name I've been trying to recall in the beginning when I mentioned that somewhere in 13th or 14th century we have a known fictional travel account or pilgrimage account, which more or less are commonly a part of our curricula of English departments. It offers brilliant narrative of the medieval pilgrimage in the verse form, which, I quote, spring is the pilgrimage season in Christendom, I unquote. Diverse forms of travel documentations have also been found existed in different cultures across the world in the medieval era. For instance, the literary form called Yuchi or lyrical travel account and the Jichi or travel diary were taking shape as early as the 8th century CE in the Chinese literature. Indeed, almost from 11th century onwards, the literature written on pilgrimage travel writing actually started flourishing as a form of travel literature from across the world. The classical era recorded the narratives, namely Herodotus' Historia, that offered information on the Greco-Persian wars and the insight into their culture as well. Geography of Strabo and Pausanias' description of Greece were also significant documents to be considered. Medieval era had witnessed more pilgrimage traveling, hence more narrative. The known accounts are, for instance, travels of Marco Polo and travels of Sir John Manuel. The accounts of Ibn Battuta, Nasir Khusro, these two are considered classical travelers as far as Muslim travel literature is concerned. They travel somewhere in the 11th, between 11th and 13th century. Hussan Sang and Fa Heng, these are very famous Chinese travelers who traveled to India as well, and they have written extensively on Indian tradition, culture, religion, and so on, were also considered significant records. The explorations, adventures, and inquisitiveness of the West mark the beginning of the modern era in travel writing. For instance, the voyages undertaken by Christopher Columbus, this is a well-known fact, universal fact, and his discovery of America has been considered a significant move. Europe seemed to be in a race to establish superiority over one another. The roots of colonialism were sown during this race. This has also turned out in the increasing number of readers. Hence, the discoveries of printing press, publication of more and more books, cartography related to exploration and travel became very popular. The concept of grand tour came in fashion. Sorry, there is a typo error. So came in fashion. It was about the mobility of the aristocrats, elite people, rich people within or beyond Europe. These stories actually paved the way for modern traveler, unlike wanderers and explorers, since wanderers and explorers actually aimed at traveling to explore or unveil those hidden uh, region or places which which haven't been uncovered yet, whereas the tourists who have been traveling under the very title of Grand Tour, they would travel just for the leisure, the relaxation. So there is a basic difference between these two travelers and their aims or intentions for undertaking a journey. The origins of the popularity could directly be attributed to the inquisitiveness of the Europeans and of course colonialism. The explorers and missionaries traveled to the far-off lands across the world. Printing press enabled them to spread the travel exploits across the world. For a long time, European travel writers hugely influenced the world. It should also be considered that the information they acquired actually turned out of huge help for them to design the political strategies and further the expansion of the empire across the world. Here I'm trying to hint at or shed some light toward the political, I would say, ambitions of Europe and in particular, British people, that they wanted to explore the world so that the explored world could be exploited to their greater advantage. The 19th century has marked the emergence of missionary travel narratives as well. Amongst the ample of prominent literary forms and conventions in the genre of travel writing, missionary narratives emerge as the subgenre of travel writing. Such narratives were written in epistolary form, from home to family or to missionary societies, or as the entries of diary or journal. The devout missionaries began globe-trotting and writing accounts of their experiences for spreading Christianity in addition to other values associated with it. The modern means of transportation introduced in the 19th century has also played a key role in revolutionizing the entire concept of traveling, because before the 19th century people used to travel either by sea or by land, and as far as pilgrimage traveling is concerned, people used to take months or sometimes years to reach to their destination, and traveling before the invention or introduction of modern conveyance used to be more difficult, used to have more pain or suffering entail in it, as the very etymology of this word travel conveys. But almost in the 19th century, the traveling was revolutionized with the modern means of transportation. And that was the reason more and more people were attracted to travel. The traveling became more stress-free, simple, and quick. The industry of commercial traveling became absolutely popular and fancy, as is the case with tourism industry today. Latest technology, affordable means for journey made traveling proliferate. Hence, the 20th century and the contemporary times has witnessed more awareness amid people regarding the larger exotic world, which is more accessible and reachable now. The visual documents of photographs. Now I'm just here trying to give you a kind of brief insights on the different types of travel writing and travel literature, and how we can actually take into consideration different aspects of looking into or examining travel narratives, which has interdisciplinary forms. So, the visual documents or photographs were significant discovery of the 19th century, as was the case with modern transportation. It affected it affected the way people had generally been perceiving things. The contemporary notion on the role of photography and the way travelers get sight of things and people and route emphasizes the theory of possessing and getting the sights um, to picture of. John Urey in The Tourist Case opines, the photograph is in some way to appropriate the object being photographed. It is a power-knowledge relationship, I unquote. Mary Louise Pratt's seminal work Imperial Eyes on travel writing point out to the association concerning travel, gazing, and imperialism. So, as I had referred to colonialism just a while ago, so when people used to travel, it was not necessary that each traveler is blessed with the skill or gift of writing down their observations or recording their observations in written form. So, at times when people used to fail to describe what they feel, what they observed, what they have witnessed so far, they would make use of photographs or they would make use of visual documents. So, critically speaking, as far as research is concerned, so visual documents or photographs could be considered a significant record when we are trying to analyze travel writing or when we are trying to perceive travel literature as a serious genre. And these visual documents could actually offer us a deep or wider glimpse into the traveling across the centuries, and these visual documents actually kind of unveil so many aspects of traveler or his or her observations through either the paintings or photographs or pictures or even maps that they have either uh, drew or they have had along. In traveling light photography, travel and visual culture, Osborne claims that, I quote, travel photography in particular formed part of the cultural armory and of capitalism's expansion, I unquote. His work gives the impression of not only photography's documentation of that particular land or its people, including the viewer's perception, so certainly the perception or gaze. This is a critical word when we say when we are talking about gaze in travel writing. So gaze again could be subjective and objective, and could actually attract so much critical attention towards it. So the viewer's perception, but also makes them part of the global relationship at large. Besides the notion, by the gazing, one takes the object. Thus, photographs or visual documentation was a significant aspect of many travelogues. Travel writing and ethnography. So, ethnography can be considered very close or integral part of travel writing genre. Since ethnography, as a kind of integral genre, has close relationship when we are trying to analyze or examining any travelogue or travel narrative. So ethnography could be a strong research field which could come to our rescue. John Paul Rubies, in the scholarly essay Travel Writing and Ethnography, states, I quote, the description of peoples, their nature, customs, religion, forms of government, and language is so embedded in the travel writing produced in Europe after the 16th century that one assumes ethnography to be essential to the genre. I unquote. The portrayal of people in their multiplicity was mainly appreciated among many other components of travel accounts that flourished subsequently from the Renaissance. These narratives were valued for not only mere purpose of entertaining, but also for the philosophical matters elevated by such diverse substantiations with reference to the collective human attributes. Travel writing and gender, this is again a very contemporary and very thought-provoking aspect. So men narrating travels of men, whether fictional or factual, has been documenting journeys since the time immemorial. The society has accepted this century-old tradition of traveling by man in addition to narrating the journey by man. The females have also traveled, initially with their families and then alone. However, the travels were neither accepted nor encouraged by the society. This has been the case more or less across the world. Moreover, such women had to encounter criticism of the society, and their works have been looked upon with suspicion, even initially mocked as well. The probable reason behind such demoralizing responses of the society was, as Susan Sontag has noted, the common belief about men who can move, I quote, more freely in the public sphere, I unquote, in comparison of women. So public sphere is a critical term again, which allows only men to wander around freely anywhere he wants. But when it comes to women, women are never allowed to wander alone in public sphere. They will always have to be very cautious and conscious of themselves or of the society they come from or they are going to. It became a common tradition of embarking on journey to distant lands by man. Thus it was challenging and naughty for the society to accept women as travelers who embark on the foreign and exotic lands without any male patron. However, such biased and judgmental assumptions were challenged by women travelers who ventured into the world on their own and over a period of severe struggle could manage to establish a new trend where women could also travel. However, ironically enough, even today we encounter the judgmental and equally traditional society when it comes to the women travel. The silver lining in the dark cloud is we are progressing and our society is developing. Hence, there seem more hope and better opportunities awaiting for the strong-headed and determined women who wants to travel. Now, quick criticism. Yes, sir. I hope I have about 10 minutes on hand.
Yes, you have.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll quickly try to wrap up the section. So, the criticism. Travel writing aims to bring information of the larger unknown world and to spread knowledge about unfamiliar and foreign societies and lands. Travel narratives have been recognized as highly problematic resources of information and facts, same as the case with historical documents. Now, when I say that travel narratives have been recognized as highly problematic resources, travel narratives do convey or do offer us so much information in a concise form from across the world, across the globe. Travel narratives actually could, enlighten us, make us more literate, aware, conscious about the larger exotic world, but at the same time, the problematic aspect that has been associated with travel narratives is the way I've been saying they could be subjective, they could be more subjective and less objective. Since when a travel writer is recording or documenting one's observations, the subjective notions pertain to be a part of the description. And so is the case with historical documents, which cannot be called or considered completely reliable, since history could be read in so many different ways because again it depends upon the historian who has written the history book. So same is the case with travel narratives as well. The casual approach of certain travel narratives in observing foreign lands and societies has been considered a responsible factor after being called partly reliable records as found occasionally. They have been certainly considered, as is the case with historical documents, partly reliable records or documentation, But we cannot fully rely on over these travel narratives or travel documentation for an objective perception. They fail to observe or at times might not allow analyzing certain factors of those cultures and society. Because when one travels from one society, one culture to the other, the clash, comparison, subjective or constant, consciousness is obvious that you keep looking or analyzing people, their way of life, their habits, their lifestyle, the tradition, culture, so everything. And this observation, that is the reason sometimes may not allow, however desperately the writer, travel writer, is trying to be as objective as possible. But this is a human tendency that we do want to add in our own personal perceptions, notions, or observations, uh, keeping in mind our background or our own society or our own, socio-economic culture. That makes one be a completely objective observer, and that is the reason travel writing or travel narratives couldn't be completely reliable, solely reliable resources for criticism. Occasionally, it has been noticed that the dedication of travelers to their own society and people led these travelers to either misrepresent or misinterpret the visited place. Therefore, to a certain extent, travel accounts convey information having biased perspective of the author. So, for instance, in my MPhil, I had taken up this book, Travelogue, Pilgrimage Travelogue, which was written by Indian Nawab named Sikandar Begum, and it was about her observation or records of her traveling to a pilgrimage place, Makkah, which is a pious place for Muslims. This Nawab Sikandar Begum was a British ally. So when she was in Arabia or when she was in Makkah and Medina, when you read a travelogue, you may find so many comparisons she made with her British allies, with the lifestyle, with Indian lifestyle, with Indian customs and traditions, and she has harshly criticized so many traditions and customs and norms of uh, people who resides in Makkah, Medina, or in a very broad term, people who lived in Middle East. So this tend to happen since she can't be solely objective when she is looking or when she is recording her observations of particular area in the Middle East. Her own beliefs and notion would be a part of it. Edward Said is a very known critic. Everyone, I assume, must have been aware of his seminal work, that is Orientalism, or revolutionary work, I would say, where he corroborated the earlier mentioned argument. He argued that the European and Euro-American scholars and travelers have represented Muslim societies and culture in illusory and fictional manners by providing false information about these people and their societies. Now, this is a particular argument I am making with reference to the description of Middle Eastern societies we may find written by European travelers, explorers, or wanderers. Since just to give you one example, the case with Middle Eastern or Muslim society is they have this peculiar aspect of zanana, or women's sacred room, a sacred room where male entry is forbidden. In particular, any man who is not a part of the not a part of the family. So if you can take up any description, any narration offered by European or Euro-American male scholars in particular, where they have described these Eastern people, in particular women, as illogical, bizarre, effeminate, and lazy. And they have harshly criticized Zanana. They would say there are so many anti-traditional activity that goes on in Zanana, but in reality, they could never manage to get in and observe what actually happens in Zanana. So these incorrect notions or misrepresentation of Muslim society, in particular as far as women are concerned or Zanana are concerned, were broken by female travelers who traveled to Middle Eastern countries, and since they were female, they could manage to get entry in Zanana. And you can find exactly sharp contrast between the description of male scholars and women travelers. Edward Said further comments in his Orientalism, this typical, very narrow and orthodox portrayal of the Eastern people and the society have drawn from a metaphorical manner. This manner has been used in order to misrepresent these people and the society. So here misrepresentation is a personal bias, personal judgment, which they would imagine this illusionary description, which they would not only keep to themselves, but which they would write and large number of people would read it. It has also been used to portray Europeans as more advanced, logical, active, and masculine in comparison of Eastern people. So, as I have been saying, personal judgments, personal biases, personal preferences ought to come into view when we are looking at another society which is different than our own society. The British colonial administrators have visited the colonial society and have written accounts on their journeys. They have minutely observed foreign culture, custom, society, and tradition while comparing their own society and culture unconsciously or at times consciously. Yet their accounts have generated important knowledge on these foreign lands and cultures, so there is no denial that these accounts, however, they are partly biased or they are more biased and more judgmental and less impartial, but these documents are certainly significant documents which helps us looking at foreign lens, society, and more or less, history as a whole. For instance, the accounts written by British on colonial lands that depicts natives, their tradition, and other aspects of their society and culture. And these descriptions would give a very, however biased, but of course, a glimpse of this unfamiliar alien lens for British or European natives to imagine, to understand, to arise that arises more curiosity and inquisitiveness in the residents to know more and more about this unfamiliar land and their culture and society, which is so different and most of the time contradictory to their own. J. Magdalene Stewart penned his impressions on exploring Australia in his Journals of Exploring Australia, 1858 to 1862. In 1864, Richard Burton wrote extensively on his undertakings in interior African regions as well as Asia and of course Middle East. Sir Richard Burton, rather I would say, he has been considered absolutely known traveler, wanderer, spy. He was a soldier, so he donned so many hats. And his writings have shed light on those hidden or veiled areas. For instance, he was the first person or first traveler who brought in light the description of Nile River, or he was the first person who talked about interior regions of Africa, the entire continent or interior parts of Asia, and of course his a travelogue which he has written on his pilgrimage to Makkah and Medina, of course in disguise of a Muslim, since non-Muslims are not allowed to enter in Makkah and Medina. So his account of travelogue of Hajj pilgrimage has been considered the most reliable and authentic account. And he has written extensively on all his travelings. And he has also translated Arabian Nights into English. So this is one name which you could always refer to when you have at least some interest in travel writing, or when you want to pursue travel writing as a serious, genre. As historian Roy Bridges in Exploration and Travel Outside Europe notates, I quote, travel writing became increasingly identified with the interests and preoccupations of those in European societies who wished to bring the non-European world into position where it could be influenced, exploited, or in some cases directly controlled, I unquote. So this influence, exploitation, and direct control can certainly be apparently visible in all the colonies of British, as is the case with India as well. So even today, we are highly influenced by American, or let's say British customs, their language, so English language, their habits or their behaviors. So the control, exploitation, or influence was more of a psychological type and less about the physical control over a person. This argument was exclusively accurate of Britain. While, on the other hand, not only European travelers but also a number of non-European travelers who traverse on novel routes have planned their journeys across the non-European civilization. They simply navigated in order to know more about the larger unveiled world. However, traveling around and exploring in terms of colonial European understanding implies the association of journeying with innovation, textual portrayal with specific reference to mapping out, documenting, administrating, and controlling new lands are exceptional. Thus, non-European travelers were not given much preference as compared to Europeans. Therefore, it could be concluded that travel accounts are serious and significant documents that work as the mode of constructing knowledge and information as a whole. So, here I conclude my talk. Thank you very much once again, Yahya sir, for having me here, Das sir, other respective faculties. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of your names, so I won't be able to mention you with name. But thank you very much. I sincerely extend my thanks to all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for such a wonderful lecture. There is a question in the chat box, ma'am.
Certainly.
So can I read it out?
Please, sir. By the time, okay, I reached here. Shaista Rahman, your
Yes.
question is really interesting, but it's quite longer. So I would really appreciate if you could please unmute yourself and ask me a question, because this one question has 2-3 questions, altogether. Shaista, are you there?
Shaista, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Shaista?
She's here. Shaista, please unmute and ask your question yourself.
Okay, I think she's not able to either hear us,
Yes.
or there could be certain...
I think she's unable to unmute.
Oh, yes, there could be certain technical glitches or network glitches as well. Right, so the question Shaista has asked is, okay, Shaista, no problem. Many fictional and non-fictional travelogues were written during 17th and 20th century by Britishers. In post-colonial era, do we consider them still travelogues? Yes, of course, they are still considered as travelogues. And as I said, the entire credit goes to British actually to make this travelogue or travel writing area more popular across the world. Unmute to mic. No problem, Shaista. I will be able to manage to answer. Actually, I wanted to have interaction with you, but that is okay. So yes, whatever these Britishers have written between 17th to 20th century, actually since the very beginning, As I said, there were accounts written right from 3rd BC or 7th BC. So these all travel accounts, documents, or records can be considered travel logs or travel narratives. Reader response does matter, but what is your opinion? For instance, text Robinson Crusoe, which is travelogue, and colonial text at the same time. Now, as far as my opinion is concerned, so in my very limited knowledge, I would say that reader response is important. And as I mentioned, that travel accounts or travel narratives as historical documents are certainly important, significant, but cannot solely be relied on as far as our critical criticism is concerned. So, reader response could be open ended. We can have various perceptions, various notions, and I again would like to repeat the point which I said that when a writer is writing something, his or her opinions would be part of the writing he or she has written. So, in that manner, when a reader is reading something, his or her perception again gets mixed with the response. His or her own perceptions, reader's perception, again get mixed with what he or she is reading. So, for instance, when I'm reading a travelogue, let's say on Europe, so when I'm looking at how Europe is described, I would also have in mind India and different states of India. So these are open-ended texts, and we are free to have our own observations. We are free to have our own ideas or notions of how to perceive this text. Shaista, could I answer your question? If you're not able to...
I think, ma'am.
Okay.
I think, ma'am, she got a question.
Okay, Shaista, thank you.
You covered a lot of aspects, ma'am, including
you,
all those historical part, up to all the things which, including Syed as well, when you're talking about the Orientalism. But what I want to ask is, when we trace this travel writings with history, particularly when I'm talking about English literature, what are your views, ma'am? From where do we find? We were talking about the Canterbury Tales in around the 14th century when it was written. But when we talk about English literature, from where do you trace or track this travel writing in literature?
So, as far as English literature is concerned, so as I gave you example of, for instance, Odyssey, or the Epic of Beowulf, or the Epic of Gilgamesh. So this has been considered earlier texts, and I would say we can trace etymological roots or historical roots of the entire genre of travel writing as far as Western travel writing is concerned since the very beginning. So earlier, even in let's say when this Odyssey or Epic of Beowulf or this text were written, because Beowulf has been considered as the earliest known epic in English literature. So the roots lies far back, deep into history, but it is only now that we've started to uncover, unveil them, and more so that we've started to find connections, common connections with them. So that is the thing, sir.
Okay. Any other participant who want to ask any question can put up your question. You can unmute yourself and ask. Any student
Sure.
or any other participant?
So all the ones who have written thank you. Actually, thank you very much for giving me your important, hour in the morning on Sunday. Yes, sir. Please.
Raisa, I'm not asking any question. It is just an observation, or rather, you can take it as a suggestion. More than an observation, it is a suggestion. Since you are in this field and you are researching a lot, and you are certainly quite interested in this field, I hope that your labor may bear fruit and you can see this field established in the academics of, I mean, in the academic departments of Karim Jamshedpur, India at least. But I think that Hindi and Urdu literature has a very rich tradition of travel writings. We call it
Certainly, sir.
Safarnama in Urdu. We
Ji.
have very rich tradition of travel writings. When we recall Ghalib going to Calcutta for the release of his pension, he wrote a good travel. Mir coming to Lucknow and writing beautiful poetry about his travels to Lucknow. Kuratulan Haider going to different places of the world. You know,
Yes.
she was a very great traveler actually, and she
Ji.
wrote a lot of travel writings actually
Ji.
in her fiction.
Ji.
Then we have Rahul Sankrityan in Hindi. Other
Hmm.
writers also in Hindi, they have very good tradition. So this is
Hmm.
one area that you can work upon and let the English people know that Hindi and Urdu has a very rich tradition of travel writings. This is one area you may work upon. Another is that and this is there is a bit of question also involved in this. We have a writer in Urdu and he is a satirical and humorous writer. Recently he died. He is from Hyderabad. Mushtaba Hussain, I hope you know her, you know him. Very
Oh.
recently he died. He is a humorist and a satirist in Urdu. And we have read a lot of humorous travel writings by Mushtaba Hussain, which he wrote about his travels to Japan and Thailand and Bangkok, etc. Do you find any satirical, humorous writing in English? I mean, travel writing in English. This is just out of curiosity. I wanted to know any satirical, humorous travel writing in English. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much for an interesting observation. So, firstly, about Hindi and Urdu travelogue, certainly there is a rich area which is yet to be discovered, and now people have started working or exploring more about Urdu and Hindi literature, and particular as far as travel writing is concerned. And as far as the question you put up, so satirical travel writings, in my limited knowledge, I haven't yet come across any. But yes, when, for instance, you read Richard Burton, Sir Richard Burton, who has written extensively, he has huge kind of, he has written plethora of books on different types and kinds. So somewhere in his writings, you may find irony, you may find satire. So is the case with so many travelogues, but we can't actually call it a humorist, or we can't fit into a particular mode or mold. But more or less broadly, we may find so many instances of satire, irony, humor in the travel accounts that I've read so far. And sir, I would like to add one more point as well, that travelogue or travel writing has been considered a kind of very significant genre as far as Islamic literature is concerned as well,
Yes.
since the very concept of traveling came directly in the could be established directly with the very migration of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he migrated from Medina to Makkah. So since then, this entire tradition came into existence, and that is the reason during my presentation I have been focusing more and more on the pilgrimage travel writing, which has been a very significant, important aspect or purpose that made so many people travel to so many different lands, so many different places, since they wanted to do it under the very title of being a pilgrim, or for the god that they have been traveling. So, sir, please do pardon my limited knowledge, but I'm still learning more, exploring more about this area. So I, I kind of, won't be able to give you exact names, but yes, we may find these traces across the travel roads that have been written so far.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really
Thank
nice
you.
listening to you. It was a very well argumented lecture. Nice listening to you. Saket, over to you, please.
Yes, sir. Uh, Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for giving us a wonderful lecture on Sunday, ma'am, for taking out your time for all of us. That is a big thing. Thank you so much. It was really
Sir,
very interesting.
humble.
You covered a lot of areas from the historical aspect up to the present scenario, up to the post-colonial era when we are talking about the travel writings. So it was a wonderful lecture, and I'm sure our students have benefited a lot. I thank all the participants today for taking out their time and being here with us on Sunday, and I'm sure all of us had a very good time. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you, all of.
So thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Risha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I wish all of you have a very good day. And yeah, sir, this has been really a very great, enlightening, initiative that you have been doing. Because as a student, I was never privileged enough to get to know more about literature in a very expansive manner beyond the four walls of my department or my college. So, students, you are really fortunate enough to have given this chance. So please get as much as possible. Thank you very much, sir.
Wow, Shukriya. Thank you so much, very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Saket, sir. And
Okay.
you said good morning in the beginning, but my mic was mute, so I couldn't respond to that.
No issues, ma'am. No
Good
issues.
afternoon, sir.
No issues.
Das, sir, do you have any question or observation or kind of inquiries to make?
One thing I would like to add, as Yahya sir has pointed out regarding Hindi and Urdu literature, where
Ji, sir.
there is a lot of satire and humor in travel writings, I am reminded of such type of writings in Bengali literature too. One
Certainly.
novel, one travelogue that comes to my mind right now is written by a famous novelist of Bengal. His name is Samaresh Basu, and he has written one travelogue, Amrita Kumbhe Sandhane, and in search of nectar. When people go to Kumbh Mela in search of spirituality, it has been shown that all these characters are not thinking of spirituality. They're trying to reinvent themselves, or they're trying to satisfy their pride, their ego, and their many other negativities also. So the very purpose of going for some spiritual attainment or salvation, they're again getting themselves entangled to materialism. So a lot of, satire is involved in that novel. Similarly, there are many other novels also. So we can also take into account Bengali literature also, when if you at all think of working on it. That's my
Indeed.
suggestion.
Indeed, sir. Thank you very much. So recently I came across a book which was recently